Welcome to the BS Roll. It's the BS Roll at night. Where a couple of the casts talk about D&D and stuff. Today I have with me a Nicholas.
What up?
And a Phil.
Cheer.
Yeah, what's going on, gentlemen?
Living the dream.
Living the dream. I saw this awesome Baldur's Gate 3 stat today that clerics are the most underutilized class at like 3.5%, which was absolutely great.
Wow.
And you know what the number one class was, if you guys want to take a guess at it?
I'm going to go with Bard.
Or Paladin.
Paladin was like 14.6. Bard was like 14.5.
Damn.
So it was like super duper close, but it was just kind of funny to like see all the different like breakdowns, and I'm like, oh man, look at that poor cleric all the way down there at the bottom. But
I mean, that kind of tracks because you start out with a cleric in your party almost immediately.
yeah, I mean, it's just like, talking about like no one wants to play the support class like in like a game, and that was like one of the developers said like no one really wants to be the support class, they want to do that, and so it's just kind of interesting being like a DM in your own game, more or less doing that. So it's interesting.
It is interesting because a bard I would consider a sport class.
Yep.
Yeah, but they can be extra horny,
Yeah.
You can't romance a dragon as a cleric.
Yeah, it's true.
It's that charisma stat. Which is funny because I play a cleric in Nick's campaign.
Yep.
Yeah.
How's that going over there?
That's going.
Anyone die yet in your?
Not well. Technically, yes.
I mean, guess like
Technically,
gone
yeah.
to zero, but then like,
No. We killed Michael's character.
oh, good.
So, spoiler alert.
Oh, great.
So in
For Rise of Tiamat.
yeah. So
Sandra, go ahead and edit that out. Michael is alive and well.
yeah. So in Rise of Tiamat, or this later part of Tyranny of Dragons, however you want to break it down. I think more recently they've combined them into one book instead of two separate, like it originally was. But there's a well that could allow you to kind of peer either into the future or answer unknown questions or find locations of stuff. And originally was used, within decently good parameters to help people out, and then it gets corrupted over several centuries from some other creatures. So to satiate the well's now thirst for blood, you pretty much have to kill someone and spill their blood into the pool for it to work. So in our campaign, Rafi decided he was going to commit suicide, which is Michael's character, and die so that they could figure it out. And then Tim's cleric brought him back to life.
Oh, that's dark. I just don't realize. Like, I feel like that just like breaks like a tenet as like I guess, is your cleric a
Life domain cleric, yeah.
Yeah, and then is it lawful good?
Mm-hmm.
That just doesn't seem like it. But different strokes for different folks, I suppose.
It was Rafi's choice
Yeah.
to, commit Sudoku, but
Oh, Sudoku.
yeah,
Sudoku.
commit Sudoku. Rafi's not smart enough for Sudoku.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
This is too hard.
Pretty much.
So going back a little bit, you said books. What does that mean?
Like, hard copy outside with bindings and paper on the inside.
Well, speaking of D&D, what is the D&D books?
Like in real life.
Yeah.
So
For a podcasting audience.
So for the campaign, it's a book, and it's given to you that's pre-written. And it pretty much has all the stuff the characters will go through and do, and kind of tell you about bad guys. And it's got a little bit of history in it. Sometimes I get stuff that I'm like, this doesn't give any detail, and I know my guys are going to ask, well, what is that? So then I have to actually go dig for more lore on shit so that I can tell them more lore.
Well, that's actually kind of like a perfect segue, because I think tonight we decided we were going to talk about different types of DMs, and then maybe like different like examples of DMs. So I think right there that kind of like falls into like cookie cutter. like you're basically taking a book, or so you would use that book for like a one shot, or potentially like if you don't want to write like a full blown story. I think
Right.
that would be something that you would use.
100%.
Have you like full on written like your own campaign before, or do you try to use like source books like that?
Not full on campaign. I've done several one shots that I've written. All the one shots that we actually did to start off this whole series before we got into our actual campaign, those were all ones that I made up all by myself.
Okay.
So I use a lot of, they have other source books that are like Adventures of the Sword Coast, which is just kind of background history on stuff, or going online and looking up lore of different realms and stuff. So like we did one that was in the astral plane, so I had to pull a lot of information out of the Dungeon Master Guide, which has some stuff.
Yeah.
I had to pull stuff out of just Wikipedia and D&D Wiki and stuff on actual D&D Beyond.
You watched all the extended cuts of Lord of the Rings to
Yep,
really just tie it all together.
100%.
Nice.
Yeah. So I also thought about, that same one that we did in the astral plane. I thought about taking everyone to the Shadow Realm, which is another realm that's in D&D, but that was going to be really hard.
So
There's a lot of scary shit there.
So with like kind of like that cookie cutter, like taking that, like do you like to like follow those guidelines, or do you like to kind of put your own spin on it?
So for the actual like cookie cutter standpoint, I'll like if I'm running through an actual campaign that's already been designed that I'm just using, I'll follow through pretty good with it, and then like I said, if it brings up something that is very vague about some of the history, then I'll look up some stuff. Maybe sometimes I tweak it.
Sure.
I like to tweak things in their guys' backstory all the time to make them fit better into what's going on.
Sure.
So it gives them a little bit more of a need to want to not only conversate but continue campaign and stuff like that. So for me, it's a little bit of a hybrid.
Sure.
I made a one shot because technically what's now just Tyranny of Dragons used to be two different books.
Mm-hmm.
So the first half was Horde of the Dragon Queen, and then you have Rise of Tiamat. And there's a period in between the break in books, and we took a really long break from it. And as we were kind of getting a little bit closer to like, hey, we might do this, I actually designed a one shot that was like the end of that campaign to the beginning of this new one, just kind of like
Sure.
a little bit of filler what happened in between. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of cool because like you don't really like have to follow a cookie cutter, and I think like a great example of like a very mainstream podcast that started that was like the Adventure Zone, like the McElroys. Like they basically started the beginner's guide, like the Wave Echo Cave, and like I don't know if you guys listen to the Adventure Zone at all, but like one of the cool things about it is like they all started playing because their mother passed away. So it's basically the
Okay.
three brothers and the dad started playing D&D, and so they started playing Wave Echo, and like as like they're doing it, like they're like very early on, like the brothers are doing lots of goofs and stuff like that. So you see like basically they're like starting to go off of that cookie cutter. So like I would say probably if we're gonna go over these different types of DMs, like they're all gonna take aspects because like it's a random game. Like you never know when someone's going to try to wrap someone up in salamander skin and carry them halfway across the world. So
exactly.
yeah, it's just kind of cool, like how you can take one idea of it and like move it to another. So it sounds like that's what you've done a lot, is you've taken already sourced out material, and then you're like, you know what, I can make this better. And my character decided that they're going to kill themselves, so now
Yep.
let's go on this thing. So that's kind of cool. How about you, Tim? Like, do you have any like examples of like kind of like cookie cutter type things, whether it's something that you've done in your like playing, or like something that you've done like in regards to like the current campaign or the one shots that you did prior to actually?
I didn't
Starting.
actually do any of the one shots. So fun fact about my campaign is I wanted to use Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Yeah.
and which takes you 1 through 5. And then I got reading through the book, and you don't actually attack a dragon.
Nope.
And I was like, that's dumb. So, like, that first session, and you can go back and listen to it, that is basically 1-for-1 the first chapter of that book. And I just changed names. I tweaked the location. I mean, Waterdeep versus Waterford. Even Lady Silver.
Whoa.
Yeah. Even Lady Silverhand is in that book.
Oh, because her real name was Goldfoot, right?
No, it's actually Lady
No, I
Silverhand.
know. I'm just a goofing.
And I just abandoned the book after that first session.
Yeah.
And I just started writing it on my own. I had a good feel about what these clowns were going to do and just started going from there.
Yeah, that's one of those really tough things because, like, for me, like, I wrote, like, a full from scratch, like, campaign. I spent, like, probably, like, 3 years working on it, and, like, it was really I was really bummed when it fizzled out, but it was just, like, wild, like, how much I went into it. And,
I got an idea.
Oh, you want me to do that campaign?
Once we kind of wrap up, which who knows how long that will be, Tim's kind of campaign. Well, we can try and resurrect yours.
Yeah, the issue is one of the players is, like, here, and, like, I've kind of already
He
talked.
doesn't remember shit.
That is true. I have told them some pretty, like, deep, dark secrets about that one. But that kind of, like, segues into, like, my next, like, kind of DM, and that would be the world builder. So, like, someone that focuses on building the world versus, like, the people that live in it. I would say, like, an example of that would be, like, Dimension 20 and Brennan Lee Mulligan. Like, he just is, like, such a great wordsmith and, like, goes, like, very, like, in-depth, like, you know, you can ask him something about it, and he's like, oh, yeah, let me tell you that elf that you talk to every third Wednesday of the month does Pilates, and you're just like, that's insane. So, like, that's how it was for me is, like, for my campaign. And, I mean, I can kind of tell you, like, the, like, high-level stuff because it's, like, pretty much, like, the intro is basically, like, it's a, like, war-torn, not necessarily war-torn, but it's, like, a power struggle. There's 3 different, like, cities. There's one that's ruled by, like, arcane magic, one that's ruled by, like, holy magic, and then one that's, like, an industrial city. And so basically the continent is, like, split up into, like, 3 different sections. And then they're, like, they're owned. Oh, God. They are run by, like, a central monarch who basically, like, you know, is, like, you know, doesn't, you know, listen to one or the other. The entire council that makes it up is all taken from different parts of the continent. And so it's like that. So it was a lot of stuff, and it's great because I love that I wrote all this stuff. Like, the first session I had, like, planned out, like, meticulously because this was, like, the first, like, major campaign that I ran, and started in a tavern because, you know, gotta do that.
What D&D doesn't start in a tavern?
Yeah, it doesn't start in a tavern.
Yeah, it has to.
Well, you know, Ryan's being Ryan and calling them the wrong name. You know, God love him. But they spent the entire episode in a bar fight. And, like, I had so much stuff, and it's just, like, one of those things is, like, you know, I built this world, and, like, they just were like, all right, we're going to start this fight. The cleric was upstairs sleeping. So it's just, like, wild to, like, you create this whole world, and, like, part of being a world builder is, like,
You just have to go with it.
yeah, your people in the world, are, like, your players are literally just, like, other citizens. And so you have to interact with them. So I think, you know, Brennan Lee Mulligan's great at that. Also, like, Matt Mercer, absolutely insane with that. Is, like, he's another one. I think he's more, like, kind of more core D&D, where it's going to be more rules-based versus more experience-based. But, yeah, I just love that. So I'm just kind of curious, kind of talking about the world builder, like, since after the first episode you kind of went off, like, what were your inspirations? Why did you decide to go with the full, like, creating your own world?
That was, for me, it was always the case. It was a group of a couple other people that said, you're a good storyteller, you should be a DM. And I'm like, that's interesting. So I just started to build off of that. And I kind of talked about that in our other episode, BS at Night, whatever the fuck we do.
At night.
where my inspirations were, but I lost my train of thought. Awesome.
Talking about building a world, you took your inspiration, ran with it. Other people said you good at talking, you good at
Good.
telling stories, and then you started telling the story, and then you forgot what you were saying. So
I'm a good storyteller.
I think you are.
And so, yeah, I just took from everyone. Like every good DM, you take a little bit from everybody. Why not? I mean, I'm a huge fan of Critical Role. I'm not ashamed to say that. And if you follow the beats of what's going on in my story, surprise, Act 2 or Chapter whatever, dragons attacked.
That was a surprise.
But
And
it's just a bunch of red dragons.
yeah, it was just
I mean, you guys had only encountered dungeons until then, so it just
true.
it had to happen.
Eventually, you have to have dragons.
Yeah.
you have to have
part of-
dragons.
it's in
Otherwise,
the-
you're just playing Dungeons and Dungeons.
Yeah.
I will say, with the world building aspect, so we're in 46 sessions now. We've been playing for a year, so I have all 46 sessions written plus 0. That's pages wise,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have about 150 other notes on top of that, of just all the important NPCs, what's going on in the world, an outline of the story that I want to tell, and what's going to happen next in the next chapter, how we get there. All of these notes, just everything, all the world, all the cities, all the guards, all of the captain of the guards, the council members all have names, and there are certain races. All the shops have certain races with names, and then they want to go to left field and go, all right, we'll just make this up on the spot.
Now, are you a sick fuck and have all your like major NPCs in D&D Beyond?
I have a lot of the ones that would be important, or say they would attack or attack them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm the same way. I've got an insane amount like I had to go through before I started like ours and like get rid of a bunch of them, just like what is going on here. And like I'd start a character and I would just have like the wildest thing. I'm like, oh, this is whatever. So like today at work we're having a conversation and someone meant to say clog, like unclog, but they said clug. And so then Clug the Uncluggable was born, and we were like talking about it, like, do we want to build a barbarian? Like, who is Clug? And so like this whole backstory. But yeah, just kind of like going back to, I was just kind of curious, like, you know, where like what would you say like the source? Like, is there any sort of like high fantasy like outside of like core D&D that you take from? You know, like, you know, Lord of the Rings, other things like King Arthur, like stuff like, you know,
All of it.
that. Okay.
There's a little bit of Robin Hood in there. I've talked about there's Shakespeare in there.
Mhm.
Emperor Palpatine.
Emperor Palpatine, and even what's going on in the world. I mean, the wizards and the wizards are dicks because I heard a song from Glory Hammer called Wizards, and they're just a bunch of dicks. And I was
Yeah.
like, that'd be funny to have a DD campaign where the wizards are a bunch of dicks. And then the rulers are racist, basically,
Yep.
who hate, like, I call them beast race, but like the other species of race, like the Aarakocra, the Owlings, the Tortles, come from this other continent that I haven't really even fully developed. And I made,
Loxodon, shout out Enoch.
yep.
Boom.
And I thought, it wouldn't it be funny if the emperor of this continent hated that continent and hated all those races?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So a lot of it is just my personal sick humor. of wouldn't that be interesting? And kind of flipping the narrative a little bit and trying to go against the grain of high fantasy and, you know, the wizards are good people. No, they're assholes. That kind of a thing.
Sure.
Same thing with the paladins.
Or the clerics in the city are just weird cult people.
Yeah. Sure. You would think that would be your warlocks. Nope, they're clerics.
I mean, but that's fine because like the whole part of like your world is like magic is like arcane magic is illegal more or less outside of being part of the wizards. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you know, when you like have that whole thing. Like for me, when I was like referring to like the arcane versus the you know, religious magic, like the holy magic, the city that was like holy basically like was like a mecca for all religions. So like, you know, you have your, you know, Dawn Fathers, you have, you know, they're all like, like I said, I'm gonna tell all of them, but I'm only gonna say one, like Matron of the Raven Queen, Cord, like all of them, like living under one because they're like unified. Like, hey, we love the gods, and then the Arcane are like, psh, you guys are idiots. Like, you're more powerful than the gods. And then like obviously the industrial ones are like science.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to like see like how everyone has like their different takes on them. Nick, how about you? Like, I know we've talked about you taking like some source books and kind of putting your own spin on it. What have you done like in regards to like world building for like your current campaign, or like ones you've run previously?
Most stuff, like if I'm building things, mostly one shots and stuff. I build out of the realm of D&D 5th edition. I haven't actually gone through. I would like to, build my own campaign, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't even know if and when anyone would play it.
Everyone is already in another campaign
Right.
or playing.
So it's hard to be like, hey guys, I got this whole other campaign that I've basically designed myself, and we should go play. And they'll be like, but we're already playing this and this and this. So I've thought about it, and even just, kind of maybe for future reference, I just haven't taken much effort into it. But for a prime example of someone who does do that world building, like you already talked about one, but there's another podcast that I really got into before I started listening to Critical Role, and this was Critical Hit. And they ran theirs out of 4th edition. But Rodrigo, the DM for this, which I think it took 14 or 15 years for them to go from literally level 1 to like level 30.
Yeah, it's like insane.
And ridiculous. But so he pretty much built his own world. And he would take, monster stats, and he would reskin it so it's similar abilities and stats and stuff, but he changed the entire way it looked for some stuff. But I remember him talking about on one of their podcasts when they were just doing kind of a questionnaire. He has like cities and people and all kinds of shit that he's created, and if like gives option like, oh yeah, you could swing by this place, and then if they're like, no, we're just gonna keep going, he's like, all right, cool, this just goes on the shelf, and I may never ever see it again.
Yeah.
But he did just crazy stuff, and the nice thing about when you build your own world, you can have little things that come back later on and like kind of recycle. So I remember one time they're going through and they find this city, it's called Tubertown, and it's just all potatoes, everything.
Love it. Like the actual people are
No.
potatoes, or
So,
just,
but
like-
everything about their city is just based around potatoes.
Okay.
So, like potato vendors and all kinds of shit. All they do is farm potatoes. But it was being attacked by more or less some demons from hell. Come to find out, Asmodeus, which is like one of the bigger demonic gods, was trying to take that town to steal souls, and then he comes up later and he talks about like, yeah, you guys kind of screwed my plans up over here. Now I'm a little mad at you. So to get my help during this other thing that's going on, you're going to have to appease me a little bit now. So it's crazy how some people can just take something from thin air, start turning it into a story, and then make a big, huge thing about it, and then just remember some of that stuff to come back season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons later.
Sure.
Yeah, I will say I'm already planning campaign 2.
Okay. Then that's, I was gonna say one thing I know that you and I kind of talked briefly about last week, like off podcast, was like world building and like some people like getting in hot water over that. So like obviously we all know Critical Role, but someone that stepped in and like did like a small series, a spin-off of that was Abria Iyengar. She's a phenomenal storyteller, but I know she got a lot of flack for that. So like, what are your thoughts on like someone basically like taking like world building that someone else has done and like putting their spin that may be like an unpopular opinion? Like,
I mean, I would be flattered if someone were to do that for me. Like, let's do 6 episodes of something else, but in your world, that's incredibly flattering and welcoming the chaos. That's my opinion. And even when I watched Abrea, it was like, this is amazing. I thought she did a wonderful job. I can see why people were upset about that, but also like, that's incredible that you're able as a DM to come into someone else's space and to DM that. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think she's phenomenal, and I think like that's like it's like very flattering to someone's like, oh, you've created this awesome world. I want to do stuff in it, which kind of like segues into like my next one. So I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts on that, Nick, before we moved on to that. But basically, it was like the DM kind of archetype of like everyone's gonna have a good time. I think like the McElroys do that, and I think Abrea does that. Is like, it's not one of those ones where necessarily, hey, this is a bad role, like you're gonna have a bad time. I'm just gonna make something funny or unfortunate happen to you. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what your thoughts on that? Because like, I'm sure all of us have played someone where it's been like, no, we're following the rules. I don't care. It's gonna be a bad time, or okay, you rolled bad, but we're gonna make this funny because everyone should have a good time at the table. So I think we'll use this portion to kind of talk about. Everyone's going to have a good time, and then after that, we can talk about everyone having a bad time because, I have a great instance of my personal game that I would love to share, and I know Ryan listening to this is going to be like, man, that was like the worst like hour and a half of my life. And looking back at it, I'm just like, yeah, I get it. So what would be, your kind of thoughts on like a DM using like everyone's going to have a good time, like no bummers, kind of, Nick, since I'm looking at you in the eyes right now.
It's definitely good for like the easygoing kind of campaigns or groups that you want to have. We're here to fuck around. We're not really end goal is not to defeat the bad guy, but we're just here for the journey along the way. And those are when you really want to have like we're all here for a good time. We're not going to have anything absurdly bad happen. Like, oh, all of a sudden, no, your character's now in jail. You have to make a new character or find a way to break out or like, oh, you're dead now. Guess you got to make a new character. But I think there's a good mix to both. Personally, I lean a little bit more towards the whatever you do will have some repercussions.
Sure.
But along the way, wholeheartedly, the whole point of the DM is to progress the story and make sure everyone's at least having some fun.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but there's also going to be the ones where they're like, I have to, like the rule, like sticklers for the rules, and I think that's where you find that like everyone's going to have a bad time because they're going to be. I don't think it's nearly as bad in 5th edition, but I think like first edition, like it was very cut and dry. So
Yep.
like. Those OGs that are listening to this podcast, shout out to you for playing Edition 1 where, everything's going to kill you.
Pretty much. Where you actually won't fulfill a full life, where the life expectancy of characters like level 6.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, Tim, what about you? Like, what are your thoughts on, like, lighthearted, everyone's having a good time?
I definitely embrace that. And having said that, killing multiple characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's unfortunate, but behind the curtain, I did give those players an option of going, hey, I just killed your character. If you want them to come back, I have reasons that you don't know about to come back.
Oh, is this like the movie The Island, where like there's like clones of them, and like if they like lose their heart, they're like, oh, don't worry, this person's gonna randomly be selected from the lottery.
You don't know. But I did give both Curtis, who was M. Scott, and Ryan Babylon the option. I can write your character. They're just dead, or there's available ways that I can bring them back. With Ryan's character, it was becoming a reverend, and
A reverend?
a revenant,
Justice of the Peace.
a revenant, and to be the champion of the Arabian Queen. So that's kind of a little bit of a spoiler of what the gods are doing and why this group of people are so important.
Even though the people from the north think we're a bunch of douchebags.
Yep. With Curtis's character, he didn't want that to happen. So then it becomes, oh, your character is dead. Just gone. So I like to be on that line. Let's have the chaos. Let's have fun. But if something drastic does happen, let's also embrace that, but also giving my players the agency to make that decision as well. Because I think saying your character's dead, leave the table is kind of like, oh, we're supposed to have fun.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be like people that are like the no bummers, and then there's going to be people that are kind of in between, and then you're going to have like the people that are like, sorry, like you're gonna have a bad time. This is how it's going to be. So like kind of like the campaign that I ran, like it was very serious. Like I was like trying to go to because this was like my first major campaign that I ran, and so I was like, all right, cool, we're gonna play this. To the rules, I had Ryan, and you all know Ryan's personality.
Yep.
Like, he's not going to want to play the serious campain, which
Chaos
is fun.
Gremlin.
Yeah, Chaos Gremlin, and, I love him. But then I had two people that had never played D&D before. Then I had, a person that had played D&D before, and then someone who was, like, really, he's a great storyteller, a writer, stuff like that. So I was like, okay, great. This is going to be a great mix of it. So, like, we have the first couple campaigns, or first couple sessions, and we end up like basically like this forest where they stumble upon a goblin, and it ends up them rolling like, I swear they did not roll over a 12. And it was like an hour and a half of them basically trying to fight this like goblin caster, like this basically person that I love. Instead of like casting spells like traditionally, all their spells were carried out by goblins. So like if they did magic missile, they were like basically a bunch of goblins attacking them, or like Unseen Servant was a goblin, and like they just like couldn't roll and they couldn't catch this guy. And like at the end of the session, like everyone was mad, but it was like I was like following like the rules like very very like to the T. And I like think looking back at that, I'm like, man, I really could have I could have like amended that and tried to be like, oh, fudge a roll, like everyone's gonna have a good time. So it is kind of funny looking back at it. It's always, hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
100%. I fudge rolls. I will admit that.
I mean, I think it's reasonable for like a DM to fudge rolls.
100%.
I do not think it's okay for players to fudge a roll, because I mean, like that's part of it. And I think for the world that you live in, or like that you've created. Like you're gonna give people those options, so I think that's good that you're not like, oh, you rolled a 1, all right, you're dead, or hey, I'm gonna write you back in, but you're gonna be, you're gonna smell like foreskin. Like that's your character's fatal flaw.
I mean, what I initially did with M. Scott when he died the first time, is he became crazy.
Yeah.
And I think death should have consequences, and that was part of those consequences. I have reasons to bring you back. You're just going to have consequences.
Yep.
Yeah, we were talking about it in like a meeting at work today. Like, actual work, but we were talking about D&D is like creating like for bad rolls, like adding like a chaos magic table. So like something that you do, like a fatal flaw, like crazy, or like your spell has like. So I had a cleric in another campaign that I played in, where he basically had like a 60% chance of being able to actually cast a spell. Like that was part of him like coming back. Like they brought him back to life, but like he only had his magic would only work a certain amount of times. So I think like it's interesting to take like those. You're gonna have a bad time, but like make it fun and make it a good time. Because like if you told me that I had like a 50-50 chance of casting a spell, I'm gonna be like, well, this is gonna be fun. Like, do I want to melee or do I want to take that attack?
Right.
So interjecting or injecting chaos always kind of solves things.
100%.
Yeah, just inject a little chaos into a bad situation, and it'll probably be fun.
I had one. So it was. We tried twice to start doing Rise of or Horde of the Dragon Queen.
Yeah.
So I had another group that we made it like 2 chapters in, and then the group just fizzled out. Conveniently enough, both times Brian was in this group. So the first time in it, there's a part towards the beginning where you can challenge one of the bad guys one-on-one. And really, the hero's not supposed to win, but it's possible. But you're also not supposed to, like, outright kill the player. So what I ended up doing, Brian's character was getting his ass absolutely kicked. So he goes down, and in, like, the Dungeon Master Guide, it talks about...
I didn't hear no bell.
It's got, like, fatal wounds and stuff like that. So I took one of his eyes. Like, he lost an eye, so he had disadvantage on all perception checks that had to do with seeing. But then I gave him an eye patch that also gave him a +1 to intimidation. So I was like, well, yeah, now you can't see shit well, but you can intimidate a little bit better, which his character was a paladin, so it kind of worked with a little bit of what he was trying to do, being charismatic. So sometimes, hey, I'm going to take a little away, but I'm going to give a little bit back, too.
Do you want to know something that's completely unrelated to D&D, but more about eye patches?
Yes.
Eye patches weren't invented for when you lost an eye. They were used for basically, like, for pirates when they were either going to be, like, at night, like, fighting day to night. They would have an eye patch so that way they could take it off and say they were going to enter, like, the hull of a ship to, like, fight or something like that. Their eye was already acclimated to
the dark.
To the dark. So it wasn't actually about losing an eye. It was about basically having, like, night vision.
Right.
And I found that out, like, within the last couple of years, and I'm like, this is actually kind of wild. I'm like, I always thought it was like, oh, cool, it's because you lost an eye, but actually it's because, you know, you're smart. Like, pirates are kind of, I've always thought pirates are badass, but I'm like, that's
even more badass.
even more badass. Like, these dudes are like going dark. So yeah, I mean, I think, like, it's cool to, like, take the everyone's gonna have a bad time and make it into everyone's gonna have a good time. So I think it's, like, kind of a wild, like, I don't know if you guys listen to Dungeons and Daddies at all, but, like, the first season was all like everyone's gonna have a good time, and then, like, the second season's, like, super dark and, like, everyone's gonna have a bad time. Not in the sense of, like, you know, you're gonna be punished severely for roles. It's just, like, the tone of itself. So it's
Right.
like, it's not necessarily like your roles. It could also be like everyone's gonna have a bad time of, like, you know, different campaigns, like Curse of Strahd. Like, that is, like, you know, that's
Yeah.
heavy. Like, that's not even necessarily like you can roll great and you're still gonna have, like, a dark time and you're like, I'm gonna have to sleep with the lights on kind of scenario. So it's just interesting that it can work both based on the dice and it can just be the content itself.
Yep.
So, like, dealing with death and, you know, being possessed and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of death in this, I guess, second chapter or second act of the story.
Yeah, I know it's been one of those things. I feel like, you know, I came in, I've been in 2 sessions, and, like, obviously my character is a lot different from even my personality, and it's just, like, interesting to see, like just, like, if you listen back some episodes, like, just, like, the tone of, like, the serious scene. Like, Ryan's like, we can't do a serious scene, and I'm just like, oh boy, this is, you know, like, you know, an interesting progression. But it's just, like, you know, I felt like to play the character correctly, it was just, you know, a very, you know, interesting way to, like, interject. And I don't know, we'll probably see some changes in my character, but it was just interesting, like, how, like, water versus a rock it kind of was at the start. And
Right.
so,
Yeah,
Well, and sometimes it's nice, too, to have that little bit of a lashback from another character, especially a new one. I mean, we lost M. Scott, Defina dipped out, and
the Baron.
Babylon and the Baron just ghosted us. But we've kind of, like, Defina coming into the group worked a little bit easier and it meshed well. But then with, like, Ida and Kolabesh, we just kind of like lost puppies are like, okay, come on, just come with us now. Let's go. Come on.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Defina was amazing to write in and give her the backstory of she's one of the ones that you were supposed to find, but you didn't.
When you, like, described her, like, when she basically found out, like, that she was there, it made me think of that scene in Austin Powers, when Will Ferrell's like, I've been burned very badly. He's like in the trap door, and I'm just like thinking like, oh yeah, like if you like think of that like that's what our character was doing 30 yards from where you guys were. And so once again, it kind of goes to that like, oh yeah, we're gonna take a bummer and kind of put a fun spin on it. So I really enjoyed that, injecting that into the podcast. That was pretty great.
And with Kolbesh, I was kind of in a corner. I was like, well, they're in this crazy city that has all just been basically wiped out, and they're all drones. How can I write these characters in? Luckily, Ida came from more, so that was a little easier. But I didn't want, again, going back to that, wanting to have fun at the table. I didn't want Curtis to sit out multiple sessions while I figured out how do I get his paladin character into the city. And yeah.
So I think like going back to that, like, did you like have like a good? I mean, I know obviously with Nick's character, like you kind of like you're really the ones pulling the strings, with that. But like with Babylon, with Ida, with Kolobesh, like what, like have you had a good like, grasp on the building of it, like any input in it, or did you say like, hey, go build this character and then I'm gonna write and figure this out how it's gonna happen?
I told them all the right backstories, and I would interject some things. Like I gave them almost a pre-session 0. This is what your character has been doing this past couple months. This is why you met this person and you met Mav, and now you're doing this. And when we started session 0, now they have context of going, oh, I know this guy and I know Mav, so there's something to hang on to. With Nick, he wrote like an elaborate backstory. I hit delete to everything.
Love it. I just kind of want to now be like, can I go back and rewrite my character and be like, oh, my character invented the bag of holding, and then so like I have access to like all these magical items, and then like I have access to like 1 billion platinum. It's just like, you can't stop me. I'm pay to win. So now I'm gonna rewrite Enoch as like something completely different.
Okay,
so.
yeah, that's fine. What's funny is I gave Nick's character a bag of holding. He has no idea what's in it.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the fun things about a bag of holding is like you just never really know, but like obviously like above table like you can just start asking for random stuff. I mean
pretty much
you could do the good old fashioned of breaking it and seeing all the stuff come out.
Right, and then we have no bag of holding.
Yeah, but like you get to know what's in there. What if it's like a dragon killer knife?
I have no idea what's in the bag of holding now.
Or like a sweet upgrade to you like flamethrower arm.
Yeah, unless and I mean at this point because I have no idea of what stuff's in there. Tim's alluded to a few things, but like when I first started, I just looked at it. I was like, "This is a bag. It's empty."
Yeah.
But Tim can put any important object he wants in that bag of holding, and then all of a sudden it rises to the surface.
Right, or you suddenly have a memory of it. And because I felt like, again, bringing fun to my table, Nick is such a pro D&D player. Like, he knows all the rules. I talk to him about rules all the time. And I thought it'd be fun, because he also has been a DM for a very long time, of going, I'm just going to strip you of all of that. And you're going to have to now learn your story as we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's most fun is like playing things that you don't play a lot. Like, I've found myself playing like, fighters, rogues. My last session I played as a druid. So, I mean, it's not too different, but it was just like, the support class. Like, I think part of it was like listening to you guys die all the time. I was like, well, this could be fun. Just, kind of.
Really, what happens nowadays is everyone else is dying and Sneeze just hiding in the shadows, just throwing knives and casting spells.
I mean, that's how it is with a rogue. Like, talking about like the world building, like it even goes like as like a player, like you write your own backstories. When I joined at level 5. Like guys at work had been playing a campaign, and they're like, "Oh, we need an extra person." So I picked a rogue that was chaotic neutral, and like part of it was like I don't like when people like pick fights with other people, so I killed someone like within like the first like 5 minutes of this, and it wasn't my intention, but it was just like I played it so much to my character like that it was like crazy, and they're like, oh gosh, this guy's the murder hobo. He, it wasn't my intention. And then there was another time when there was like a fight, and I could choose between, guy that was, just got knocked down, death saving throws, or I could steal a very expensive item. I'm chaotic neutral. I'm going to steal the very expensive item. And then on the next turn, I, gave him a potion. And so, now I've got something that they referred to as, what was it? It was my butt crystal or whatever. It was I pocketed this butt crystal. Versus, and, people were upset about that. And it was they were so mad. And I was okay, well, I'm playing a character. And they're well, you're kind of sarcastic and you're kind of chaotic neutral as a person. And so then the next time I played with them, I played as a very lawful or chaotic good druid. And so it was oh my god, you were just playing a character. I feel they apologized for it. And it's just so interesting how you can take that as a DM and so much stuff and how to min max. Oh cool, I could learn how to have 21 AC at level 3 come at me. And so
Right.
it's just it's cool that you did that. That's something that you don't see a lot. You at least give them some semblance of it. And I know since you've picked up the mantle of Snee, you've made some decisions, but obviously there's been some decisions that the DM has, so kind of goes
100%.
back to it. So that's pretty cool.
And I've had to shift the story because I lost the Baron, who was a very vital person in the story, and then lost Scott and lost Defina. So I've had to massage the story a little bit.
So that would also kind of go into the conductor, as they call it, the person that railroads. So that's another archetype of a DM. Sometimes you're gonna have those DMs that I have a specific story and this is how I want to tell it. This is what's gonna happen. I mean, without diving, I don't want you obviously to give it away because but
Give it away, give it away, give it away now.
with Snee, how much do you feel now you've seen it being railroaded versus unfolding kind of naturally?
Well, so what I have done is the first couple of levels were kind of heavily railroaded, giving him insight of this is who he was. Now I'm playing with it where he's making a decision, so I'm going to play with that a little bit, massage it. Oh, maybe that is as part of his backstory. Maybe that's who he was, that kind of thing. And informing, because I always go back to, are my players having fun?
Yeah.
And I may throw in a Chaos Gremlin where it's just from left field because it's funny to me.
You don't have to. Ryan's at the table. You just let him loose and he'll do it for you.
100%.
The real end story is basically KOTOR. I'm going to turn out to be Revan, and then I'm just going to kill the entire universe. So
It could be. And I've hinted at your story and the shift of it. I think the last time you had a dream, that was really the shift happening, where you found that you're in a bar and you have human hands. That was a massage that I did, so to speak. But I haven't mapped out what's going to happen to him, and I'm also informing what decisions Nick is making with his character and kind of playing with that as well.
I just kind of hope that you come out of stasis and you have human hands, but they're crudely put on stuff. It's oh my god, what'd you do while you're sleeping?
someone's actually just skinned someone's hands and then slipped them online like gloves.
Yeah.
I have alluded to it. The stone the gem that he wears in his chest and his hand is made of the same material that you find with the gods,
Eleutherium or
Yep.
of which can transfer souls.
Interesting.
That has been revealed.
So I'm just really hoping that we get to the big bad and hopefully it's not you and there's this sick Megazord of other because I don't know, have you guys actually said what Snee is he a Warforged or is he an automaton or is it its own thing? I'm curious.
I think
Or maybe I've gone too far.
you've gone too far. I think we have said he's a Warforged.
I believe so.
I'd have to go back and
And
look
we
at
didn't
it.
specifically say the word Warforged. It's basically the same idea.
Sure, yeah, I get that, but I was just kind of curious because I think when I had access to, I don't know if this was something that you locked me out of or it was just D&D Beyond, but like when you first invited me, like it let me open up all your guys' sheets and I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to look at this later. And I went back in later and it was like, it wouldn't let me click on any of them. I'm just like, you know what? This is probably better. I probably was locked out so I wouldn't be like, oh, well, I could do this, this, and this to, kind of goes back to that like DM mindset of like, oh, I can figure out how I can, be of, advantage to them. So I was just curious kind of like if he was a Warforged or automaton, but.
So obviously the class is Warforged, and I kind of let Tim dictate what exactly, because he'll take stuff and just kind of tweak it to fit.
I mean, it's
in
its
his
own
role too,
thing,
so.
yeah. But I just hope that like there's like a bunch of like Warforged, and they like turn into like some sort of Megazord.
Well,
fight some giant mega dragon, Giga Dragon.
I took Linguist at one point for one of my feats, and I picked two languages to learn. One of which was the Abyssal, so that I could read that fucking cursed book that disintegrated. That I have not been able to find another one, even though I'm still trying. But then he put binary as one of my actual languages.
Yeah.
He was like, yep, binary. So at some point, I might be able to talk to other people that speak binary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be pretty cool. Like going back to like the world building is like seeing like these new races and creatures being like brought in, and like how you can incorporate them into your story, because like there's always new source books coming out, and you see something 100%. Like I wanted to be a Loxodon because I heard it in Critical Role, and I'm just like, oh man, this was great. So I literally went and bought the book. So
you could have bought just Loxodon.
I know, but I was just like, I want this.
I'll just take the whole thing.
Well, because it has like centaurs and minotaurs and all these incredible things, and I'm just like, this is super rad. Like, I want to use this, like, because I have like a couple different books, but they're like older books, and I'm just like, there's new things. I really want to try them out. And so talking about having all of these things and railroading and, pretty much knowing exactly where the story is going, I want to flip that on its head and talk about minimalism. Like talking about basically not having like a plan and just like kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Have you had any scenarios where this has happened to you in like a game, in a one shot? Tim, I guess I would start with you. Is like, have you had any like, you have nothing going into it, like you've basically been thrown a curveball, either in like creating, a game for just like a quick thing, or like actually in the campaign itself? Like, have you ever been like, oh my god, here we go, it's being built as we go along?
So, I mean, that happened when a DM is a moron and he introduces the deck of many things, and then your entire table has Chaos Gremlins, all of them. You just have to go with it. And so when Snee actually got voided to hell, I had no idea what hell was going to be like when that happened.
Sure.
And so a lot of it was improv. A lot of it was just making it up on the fly. And then going, wouldn't it be funny, because like in D&D lore, you have the 9 hells and you have the Lord of Hells. Wouldn't it be funny if it was just Vegas? That is really funny. So then I rolled with that.
Sure.
So there's been a lot of instances where, again, it goes back to that. I have this plan. Oh God, they're going left, and now I have to make everything up.
Now, like, how much of that, like, now I'm like trying to like think back, and I'm like, oh man, I'm not a true fan. I don't remember exactly the moment it happened, but like when they went to hell, did they go to hell immediately, like same episode, or did you have any time to prepare?
We cut the episode when I went to hell so that Tim could create something.
Okay.
But even in hell, I mean,
you still have to come up with stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really liked doing it when we were in hell. I would do that to Tim quite a bit. Be like, oh, you know what? Cal Ferris is going to take them over this way. Tim's like, fuck.
Yeah, because I didn't have a lot of it mapped out yet.
Or like giving random NPCs like ridiculous names like Frank and stuff like that. Like, I'm a pit fiend in hell. Oh, hey Frank, how's it going?
Exactly.
Linda's doing great,
Because even like Mav didn't have a cousin. He didn't have a sister. He didn't have the whole shop in hell. That was all stuff that I was like, I got to do something, because originally the plan was for them to have this hut, the Dick Key,
Yep.
so they can get to the Feywild and get to Hell. So I had that mapped out. Well, the deck of many things threw that out the window, so now I have to have another reason for them to get into a specific spot that they need to get to Snee to. So then having Mav having access to a shop, started mapping all that out. He has a cousin because he can't be there all the time, so he has to have someone run the shop when he's not there. And now, because there's a thing with the Feywild, now he has a sister who has the same kind of thing in Hell as in the Feywild. I haven't really mapped out the Feywild yet, so yeah. And a lot of it is being informed by, oh, I have a bunch of Chaos Gremlins, so I'm going to do things that are funny and chaotic. Like, again, Hell not being Hell, but being Vegas. My players, I know, feeling my table, they're going to appreciate that. They're going to have a lot more fun than, this is 9 levels of Hell. You're in the 2nd level of Hell. And
You gotta get to the 5th to go get your buddy.
no, it's fucking Vegas. There's strippers. There's prostitutes.
Hot tieflings. Yeah,
Hot
I mean,
tiefling.
that,
Hot
was,
tieflings.
that lore was canon, so you didn't have to worry about that. I had a thought, now it slipped my mind. It was so good, and it was going to teach every single one of you listening how to make $1 million.
I said this in a previous episode. One of my strengths is improv. And that's from another thing that I used to do, is learning improv. And so being able to just make shit up on the fly is something that I feel like I'm good at, unless it... where I get tripped up is, have I said that before? I can't remember. I need to dig through. Like when you mentioned the who was the previous champion of Pelor, I don't remember if I had said that or if I hadn't yet. So I had to dig through my notes and go, maybe I did tell Gulbish. And so now I need to come up with that name, and I couldn't find it. And so I went with just Lost.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because like I had like listened to the episode that we were talking about beforehand, and like I knew that you never mentioned it, and that's why I asked about it. And so I was just like, I'm not going to be like, oh well, you didn't mention it. I was just like waiting to see if like you were just going to pull up some sort of like Bingus, good old Bingus showing back.
Or that could have been something that Tim had already had planned. You
Yeah.
know.
I mean, that's one of those things is like, you know, I am a new character and like you haven't played with me, but, you know, a session before that. And so you're like trying to get that, you know, like trying to gauge that, you know, we've been on, you know, 2 dates, you know, a date and a half, you know. So it's like,
Am I going to be able to put it in his butt tonight or not? I don't know.
what's he going to do here? And so I think you handled that very well. You kind of let the dialogue roll at the table while you looked at that. So I thought that was an incredible way of handling it. So that was pretty cool, kind of rolling with that minimalism. You're like, you know what? I'm going to let them figure it out. And I posted a meme on our Instagram, the BS Roll, if you want to check it out. Basically about Pedro Pascal eating a sandwich and just watching. Like it's like the DM when my party is basically making something way harder than it actually has to be, and he's just like eating a sandwich and watching it, and I'm just like, that is like such a true thing. It's just like you can just say something funny and be like, all right, you're in Hell. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you about, with Hell being a you know, kind of on the fly. Was the conch shell something that was on the fly, or was that something that you were like, you rolled for it, or was that something that you're like, here, have the shell, and you're gonna be blasted back to Hell?
That is an actual item that you can find in D&D Beyond, and it came in through a loot table. I used a randomized loot table that came in, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then I think I Chaos Gremlin did a little bit where you blow into it and you go back to where it was.
Because in the description of the item it says this could be set for a fixed location or to take you wherever you know where your mind can take.
Yeah.
So I thought it was great that it was the fixed location because it was
Yeah.
perfect.
I mean, if you
Like, oh, dude, we're out of Hell. Like, thank God. It'd be like us finding a conch when we're in Moore, and then all of a sudden Babylon blows it, and he's fucking back in, or
they're back,
they're back in Moore. So I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great, and also like if it were able to take them wherever they wanted to go, like that could just be like super OP when you're like, all right, I want to go to the dragons while it's sleeping, and I'm gonna punch it, and then you're back, and you're like, all right, I'll see you in a day, bitch.
I mean, it's just similar with the hut that you guys have, and you haven't really done anything with your hut because you don't know where to land you.
Right. We've done a little bit of the experiment, you know, when Ida went back to Hell, and Snee's like, well, let's see if the hut can get me close from what they tell me. And then I walk out and it's just fire and brimstone. And I'm like, nope, this is definitely not where they are. Come back up.
Yeah, too bad it's not like, oh, hey, Frank. Oh, hey, how's it going?
But so, and then just kind of from there, like I would love to explore the hut more, but I also know like we have a storyline that, we're also trying to progress as well. And I'm like, we could spend 3 episodes just exploring shit out of nowhere, but then, one, Snee knows the importance of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
2, above table, Tim's already told us, he's like, if there's, events going on in the world and you guys choose not to address them, they will sort themselves out in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if there's dragons rampaging around or a beholder mind controlling an entire city and we decide to go, hey, cool, look at this shiny thing over here, and we fuck around with this for a week, next thing I know, everyone could fucking be dead.
Yeah, and that's sort of what's happening in the campaign now. With the whole venture to hell has taken a toll on these other cities. And they failed their, and Tegan, they failed a lot of their checks. So it's going to make each and every time a little bit harder. It's kind of the consequences. Like, I've been pointing on the nose, hey, there's fucking dragons destroying everything. Well, what happens when you have a dragon and this horde all chilled out? It's going to get harder. It's going to get tougher. He's going to get more vain. He's going to get more angry. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but
less support from the other people that may still be alive in the city.
Yeah, but then also, like, you can't be fighting a dragon and all of a sudden, like, a Rakshasa shows up and just shanks you.
I mean, that's part of... They have this magical hammer that they ask nothing about.
Asmodeus sends his regards. Stab, 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 stab.
Right.
Nick, how about you? Have you encountered, like, in your DMing, like, times where you're like, oh, I haven't prepared for this, I'm just going to go into it? Or,
Always.
Someone just throws you a curveball and you're like, all right, I got to do this.
It will always happen.
Yeah.
I don't care how good of a DM you are. I don't care how non-chaos goblin-y your players are. Someone will eventually stroll into a room that you didn't expect to be there, and then next thing you know, you're like, So, in my opinion, too, like, using the core books and running through something that's already created, they have some pretty generic stuff throughout the whole thing, but then someone will want to do something crazy or whatever, and you're like, well, they didn't think about this, or they did, and they just said, nah, that won't happen, and then it does happen. You're like, well, what am I going to do? So I think, personally, when you create your own world, it's a lot easier to help with that, because you're making shit up as you go anyway. When you've got something that's already kind of created for you, and then you're like, now I gotta fucking throw something else in here because someone's doing something stupid.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, so what is this gonna do? Luckily, so in the very end of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, at one point they found this painting, right? That is magical, and you can use it to teleport. Now, it teleports you like up to 2 miles away from where it's at, just somewhere in the wilderness, kind of randomly. But I was like, and it specifically states that it has to be on a wall to function.
Yeah.
So, of course, they figure out it's magical. They stow it in their backpack. And I'm like, someone's going to do something stupid, lay this on the ground, and then try and jump through it. Lo and behold, so Curtis, in the fight that he initiated with an adult white dragon, decides, oh, we're getting our ass kicked. I'm bounce. Throws it on the ground. Goes to jump through it, and I go, how do you jump through it? He's like, I just go head first. And I go, all right, well, you smash your head on the ground. You're going to take whatever damage from this. But if he had put it up on a wall and gone through, I'd have been like, well, he's going to be fucking flying down in the sky. Because they're in a castle in the air that's flying around. I'm like, they're way above 2 miles above ground. So I was like, this is either way, it's going to be hilarious, but Curtis's character's going to be screwed.
See, it's interesting you say that, because when I heard it, I immediately thought that someone was going to cast, like, Stone Shape and build a wall and then put it on the wall and then do that. Like that's where my mind went. So it's just interesting that like, you know, Chaos Gremlins, like you just never know how someone's going to do it or
Right.
how they're going to interpret it. So I had one where it was, you know, in the dungeon that was running, where basically they each were given, like they all had to stand on a pedestal, and they each were given a different magical item, like
Right.
a movable rod, a bag of I think it's bag of trick rust or whatever, you know, the different ones,
Right.
which basically like you can like throw it and the animal appears, a shield. I can't remember. There were a couple other ones, but it was just like, you know, going back to that, like on the fly, like I had created this like very meticulous puzzle, and they basically conjured a bear, then hovered, like basically made the bear levitate. God, I couldn't think of that word. And then they basically pushed the bear through space, holding the immovable rod, and taught it to like click it. And so it was just like one of those things that it was just like so great on like all this stuff that they did, that it just like sometimes you just have to be the minimalist and you have to just like let it play out, and you're just like, oh, this is whatever, this is what's gonna happen. Or another time when Ryan got the bag of tricks or whatever, he like summoned a goat, and then they like got the goat drunk, and then they left it there, and basically you have this drunk goat in this like pool of alcohol, and I'm just like, oh my god, what is happening? And then, mind you, this is like where I'm trying to play very seriously, and it goes from a drunk goat to immediately a levitating bear. And I'm just like, all right, I gotta change. And that was like the last session that we played, and I was just like, man, this is wild. And so like I love like sometimes just like kind of having like the loose like, oh, I'm gonna go with it, whatever, because like, you know, I meticulously planned it, and then like, all right, cool, we're gonna levitate a bear. I'm just like, all right, there go my notes. Throw them out of here. This is what's happening.
I got a couple of stories like that. So there was one, we had a sorcerer, and they were trying to, I think, like cast Zone of Truth, but then chaos magic happens. She spawns a unicorn instead.
Love it.
So then we use the unicorn instead to then intimidate the guy to tell us the information. Instead of being like, Zone of Truth, tell us what we want to know, we just intimidated him out of it.
You guys played good cop, bad unicorn.
Yeah. Well, then the unicorn fucking rammed its horn through the dude, killing him, and then just disappeared.
As a unicorn does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched this dark thing where it's like, instead of Zone of Truth, like lay a NPC on the ground and have the like have your druid like druid craft like plants through their body until they tell you the
my
truth.
God.
I'm just like, oh my god, this
Like
is like
just druidcraft bamboo through them.
Yes, that's exactly what they were saying. I'm just like, oh my god, like it's just so wild, like how dark and twisted. So I know like we've talked a lot about DMs, like who would you draw like most your inspiration from, like when you talk about like, oh man, when I think of D&D, this is who I think of, or like what DM really got you into like diving into the lore or something like that.
Well, me personally, so I just, like Tim said, I like to build very extravagant backgrounds. I like,
Yeah.
Me having been a DM, I like to supply a DM with stuff to draw me in more, because it makes things better. Now, Tim, you know, went and just flipped the script on me, and he's like, nope, you're a blank canvas, dude, and we're going to figure this out as we go. All right. But, I mean, even the story I used, it had memory loss. So it was like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know where I came from or who I really am, but my name comes from, you know, the SN33 or 3E on my arm. So Tim used that I had given him. But I had like NPCs that he could have worked me in with or whatever. He's like, nah, we're going to take all that away. He's like, I'm going to use a couple things that you had in your backstory to kind of give you some direction at the beginning. But I was like, all right, cool. But with that desire to always wanting to have these details, be able to map things out and be able to connect some dots and draw things in is kind of where I get my DM style of always wanting to look and just know information. I get, and I wish I were better at it. But like one of my buddies growing up, when we first started playing D&D, he was just so easily able to like kind of immerse you into the story, and it helps to have that kind of information to be able to be like, okay, cool. Now whether sometimes he was just drawing like pulling shit out of his ass or if he knew stuff, for me it makes it easier for me to do that by knowing. Some people can just pull shit out of thin air and be like, okay, cool, but it was like being able to just paint the picture is, I think, the best way to get characters and players to really be involved.
Sure. So you wouldn't say that you'd say from your friend, and you wouldn't say from like a pop culture icon like Matt Mercer or Brandon Mulligan or Abria Iyengar?
No.
That's perfectly admirable. Like, that's cool. Like, I know, like, you were into D&D like way before like it became you were hipster of D&D.
I was into D&D before D&D was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, same. I mean, I played in high school, so like I get that. I know you played.
I played in middle school.
I know. I've listened. I've heard. So yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and it's like cool to like, see like love something, and then to just see it grow into this like crazy powerhouse, and like now it's like, it's gotten more traction, than it's ever has, and then now you've got games like Baldur's Gate 3 that's like, it's a whole new level of like now people are getting to D&D. Like I've talked to like a couple different people that are like, oh, this is what D&D was? I thought it was way like less cool than this. And I'm just like, well, I mean, it's a bunch of people talking, but like, your mind's eye is much better than anything that a video game can do.
Right.
So that's,
Mm-hmm.
I love to hear like you take that from like before it was cool. Tim, how about you? Who do you draw your inspiration from? And no, you can't say Nick.
Or Matt Mercer.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's definitely Matt Mercer, a little bit of Brandon Lee Mulligan, and even some of the other casts of Critical Role when they have DM'd. One of the best DM players or players in D&D I think ever is Sam Riegel. Just the
True.
way he knows the rules. He's a Chaos Goblin, but he plays it to the very well. It's Chaos Gremlin that fits his character, fits the story. Like he just comes at it from all different angles. And so when I'm trying to be a DM, I want almost inspired by that. Like if I can have a player be that crazy but still fit in this way, that's almost a compliment. So I do draw inspiration from that. And again, just storytellers, generic storytellers like Tolkien. I can't think of his name. His best friend, Narnia. I can't think of his name.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah, the author of that.
I have no idea.
And even drawing inspiration from like video games and their story and narrative stories. KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic, drew inspirations from that, and different storytellers, different stories. Drawing inspiration from that because I'm a storyteller. I'm very bad at D&D, but I'm good at storytelling. And I just throw 5e on top of the story. That's how I DM. So yeah, it's drawing inspiration from that and being a good storyteller from what I used to do. So,
well, now that you've brought up Sam Riegel, I need to know two things from you. One, what is your favorite character of his? And two, what is your favorite story or thing that character has done? Because there are so many when I think of Sam, and so I'm just curious, like, what you're gonna say, and I'm gonna tell you mine afterwards.
okay, it's definitely Scanlan, and when he
100%.
leaves Vox Machina, that and the gusto to do that, and for it again being a Chaos Gremlin and going, no, this fits my character. This is what my character would do, and also injecting a ton of chaos and going, no, my character is going to leave.
And bring that damn Artificer. God, Artificers.
Spoilers to Nick.
Curse you. Oh, whoops.
It's all right.
I mean, it was 2015, so.
Yeah, sorry, statute of limitations is over.
Exactly.
How about you? I mean, I guess.
What was yours from Sam
Oh,
Riegel?
yeah, absolutely. So, Scanlan is my favorite. It's just something about it. Just, the whole horny bard trope. Like, he owned it. But my favorite scene, and it is like something that lives rent-free in my head, is the Ceratops.
Scambo.
Yeah, when he scambos into that building in Whitestone and just absolutely obliterates it, because it's just like, I don't know, like, so when
Again, Chaos Gremlin.
so when I listened to that, like, I had like gotten rid of my car, and basically I would commute to work, so I'd like take the bus, take Metrolink or whatever. And so like it was just like me closing my eyes and just like letting it in, and like that was like one of my favorite things. Like went back and listened to it multiple times and just like picture him doing it, and it was just like great because like the roles were just so funny and just like it was perfect. And so that's what I really really love. And like yeah, he's a great storyteller. You know, he's Chaos Goblin, and like he really like he brought that character. I mean, he brings all of his characters to life. But
100%.
yeah, that scene was incredible.
And I'll say this too, because I watched the Vox Machina TV show,
Yeah,
because they kind of skip into that really quick compared to like the actual podcast, and so I was almost to that point in the podcast, and I watched it, and then going back and actually listening to it, I was like, oh man, I was like that like actual video they did for it doesn't do the actual audio visualization you get justice.
no, absolutely not.
Because the way that whole thing went, and I mean, like they hit the high points, but I was like, man, it was way better of a scene on the podcast than in the actual TV series.
Because it was like there was a part when like he bust open the door and they're like smoking and playing cards, and like that right there I need. And there's a lot of stuff that you just can't have it on, like because you know they're obviously trying to mainstream
Right.
it for Amazon. But yeah, absolutely agree. Like just picturing in your head, like it's so much better. I mean, they did a great job animating it, but it kind of goes back to like if you were to tell me if I had to choose between a movie and a book, I'm picking the book because my mind is going to draw something
Right.
way more insane.
And even just Matt pivoting and going, oh, we're going to do that.
Yeah, like it is absolutely incredible because like the entire rest of the cast is getting their ass beat across town, and he's just like
A Triceratops.
Triceratops, like so great. And I just like picture it wearing his like little like beret type thing, just like
Yes.
like just like on like one of the horns, like maybe like on like a side horn, just like doing that, and like that's great. And like talking about, I guess we'll find out what your favorite scene is, Nick, or if Scanlan's your favorite.
So
And then I'll tell you what
I do love Scanlan, but I actually I love the scene with, and I don't even remember who. It was one of the cameos they had on there, and it was when they run into the candle maker near the fire Ishari when they first go up that way. And I loved just kind of like the demeanor, and the voice was fantastic for the character, and he's just like, oh, I'll just send my zombies with a candle bomb and, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, I was like, just that whole idea and, like, creating a new way for just magic to exist,
Yeah.
I thought was fantastic. And, you know, Matt Mercer and the whole group all the time are just kind of coming up with either weird hybrids from Pathfinder or 5th edition or just a new way to do some stuff. I'm like, that's what it's all about sometimes, is just finding something to make it super niche for the story you're trying to tell.
I mean, that was like my goblin caster because he was basically
Right.
the goblin king. And so, like, he had this weird, like, perverse magic where all it could do is just, like, he was raised by goblins, so he could only, like, summon, like, you know,
Goblins.
But, like, going back to, like, where I draw my inspiration, like, yeah, I think, like, Matt Mercer, Brendan Lee Mulligan, Griffin McElroy, the McElroy family, and then like Anthony Birch with Dungeons and Daddies. But I would say like a lot of like my like love of like the storytelling and fantasy like goes back to Star Wars. Like that like one person like on a mission to basically like save the world. Like I don't know,
Right.
that like rogue type like, all right, I can do this. That's like where I don't know is the most like fantastical world, and I love to like bring that in if I can. So you know, having some sort of crazy wizard-esque magic with a sword, like, you know, when I got a sword, I'm like, is this my lightsaber? Is this has the power of the sun?
No.
I'm like, oh my god.
I'm the Jedi here, all right?
That's fine. I'm cool with that. But I'm the one who can mind trick you.
Mm.
Modify memory, baby. I'm
Yeah,
gonna make you think of something else.
That's my thing, is my spells are still kind of low level because I'm not like super high level since I'm multi-classing.
Yeah.
I only have access to. My spell book only has first level spells, but I do have second level spell slots.
Sure.
But because of the multi-class, I'm still only at
Yep.
one first level spells.
And that's the thing with 5e. Once you start progressing in the higher levels, you have to be more chaotic.
Yeah.
Some of the
absolutely.
spells are just bonkers, and then you have to just go, all right.
And then like some of like the feats that you can take, like
Uh-huh.
FEAT, all you weird feet people. But like you can take those and like learn spells that you wouldn't, and then like you don't tell your party, and then all of a sudden you're like casting a weird ass spell, and they're like, what's going on there? So yeah, I love. Yeah, there's just something magical about the game.
Well, that was when I hit level 3 with my rogue, and we had M. Scott, our warlock, being the only guy that was casting magic. Now I was in essence magical, but
Yeah.
there was nothing magic that I would shoot out. And then all of a sudden, I hit level 3, and it's like, oh, I've tapped into the ability to cast magic. And Curtis would always do his Witch Bolt.
Yeah.
Well, and then for the first time I cast Witch Bolt, I rolled a nat 20 and just murdered a bear. And then M. Scott's like, getting a conscience because now Sneeze casting magic, and it just seems so much more powerful. And I was like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that always is a good feeling when either you're like, I mean, obviously it feels terrible when you're on the shit end of the roll,
Right.
But it's just like so great when you're just like, oh man, I watched them cast a spell. Like that happened with me in a campaign when our cleric tried to cast a healing spell and it failed, or I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was like a healing, and I was like, then I did it and it was much better. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm the healer now. And what's funny is because I was a healer and then the cleric joined, and then like my character had this like chip on their shoulder, like there's a new healer. So like I built that into like my character in the story. So it was just a really bitter rivalry of like anytime they would do something like and they would fail, I would mock them and then try to do it better. So yeah, that's great.
Even if they healed them for like 4 of the 5 points they needed, you're like, well, I'm going to heal you for more.
Yeah, lay on hands. Well, I think that is what I've got in regards to like archetypes. Unless you guys have any other things that you wanted to speculate on top of that.
Not in particular. I mean, we pretty much hit all the big ones, and obviously there's the people who are crossovers between multiples. And
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be a little bit of everything. I don't
Yeah,
think
I
if you
agree.
don't,
I concur.
if you don't adopt like at least some of those, like you're not going to do well as a DM. Like I shouldn't say you're not going to do well as a DM. It's just like going to be hard because you just never know when something wild's going to happen, and you're going to have to pivot.
I think
Like rewriting a story
Right.
multiple times.
Well, and I think that takes away it just takes away the fun for everybody if you're too focused on one type or too megalomaniac to stay in one section of it, because if you can't bring things down to the more serious, somber side, or the no one's gonna have fun, well then that takes away from how good the every time we're gonna have fun. And if you can't sometimes railroad and get people on track, all of a sudden we could be fucking
In the
deep
casino.
dives in the casinos of hell,
Yeah.
fucking around for months, and we come back up top and the whole world's just gone.
Which is a possibility, and I would roll with that.
just completely redo the entire campaign, like swear fealty to the dragons,
Right.
become racist overlords.
Like my whole actual backstory is non-existent because everyone that's pertinent's been murdered by dragons.
Yeah, so you're like, you know what? If I can't beat them, I'm gonna join them.
And my opinion, this is strictly my opinion, is allowing my players agency to do something like that. But also having the knowledge of going, they all, at least I will speak for the 3 of them, not you, because you're a couple sessions in, like the story so far, want to engage with the story, so then I have to go, oh, it's been 2 months since we played, I'll railroad to get them back on track.
Well, just to get Ryan to talk, you had to kind of railroad it because Ryan's
Sometimes.
like, I need a cue. What am I doing? Oh my god, what do I do with my hands?
Right. And again, allowing the table to go, if you want to be chaos, we go to hell and spend 3 months casino, that's on me. Make me write the story. Make me, as a DM, figure out what's next.
Yeah.
And I think there's give and take with that, and you have to live in that reality. But I'm also a chaos gremlin that I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's honestly the most fun is you just have to roll with it because, you could spend, years planning and then in an instant someone turns into a Triceratops and does this or,
Right.
dies. Like, how
Cast
dare
lightning
they?
out of their dick.
Yeah.
Or something personal happens and you have to write a character.
True. Yeah, I mean,
off.
that honestly is, like, probably the toughest thing for a DM is, like, dealing with, like, someone leaving, above the table. Like, that's a huge thing. And, like, having all those, being a minimalist, being someone that, understands bummers, being someone that doesn't want to have bummers, like, that, having that, you're going to be able to bounce back from that. So,
Just do us one favor. Somewhere down the road, maybe in like season 2, there's just a drunk paladin named the Baron in some random bar just being drunk and sloshing things around, much like in Dragon Age 2 when you run across Alistair if he doesn't become king.
true. I mean, I do love, like, the continuity of, like, bringing something from, like, forever ago. And my favorite thing, going obviously back to Critical Role, is, like, when Travis Willingham hears, like, something and he, like, connects it in his mind, he just loses it because he's like, wait a second, you're bringing back lore from so long ago, like, Calamity, bringing things from the
Right.
first session and, going full circle. So, like, I think having that, like, larger vision and, like, being that world builder of, like, oh, people can live in my world for, like, years to come. Like, what, the longest game's been running for, like, 40 years or something like that?
Yep.
Or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's potentially stopped. I think, I remember seeing an article about it, but, like, the same guy's been running a game forever, and players have come and gone, and, like, it's been real life. And so, like, it's cool to see that, like, a DM being that passionate about that. And, like, obviously that guy has seen literally everything. And
I
that's,
can't imagine. I was just reading that article. 40 years, 500 different players.
yeah, something crazy like that. And then,
It started in 1982, and they have adapted since 1E and has added on all the additional additions.
and he's like one of those guys that has like the like model train in his basement, but instead it's like all these different terrains and stuff like that, and like his like mini game is on point. Like it's just incredible.
I can't even imagine.
That's the one thing that I miss about old school D&D is the minis were so much better. Now, granted, I mean, like, now we're getting to, like, 3D printers and things are getting better, but it was, like, when we first tried to restart playing D&D with 5th edition, and that was, like, shortly after it came out. Like, I was, like, trying to go find the old school metal miniatures, and it's fucking impossible unless you just go to, like the comic book stores or whatever, and someone's selling their old shit. Because otherwise, it's like, especially like before D&D really, really started taking off, it was hard to find even miniatures that were related to the new D&D stuff. It was like, cool, I don't know where to go find shit. Now it's better, but it's also fucking expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dwarven Forge is ridiculously expensive.
Well, now they have like that like off-brand, like some guy like basically recreated them all, and so you can just 3D print them. Something Forge, I can't remember what it is, and it's just like, I mean, I get it, like be accessible, but like blatantly ripping this dude off, like who's making a business, it sucks. So,
Right.
sometimes flattery is not the sincerest.
Well, it depends. Like people using your story mode or your story or your world that you've built. I mean, we're not making any money off this.
What?
Yeah.
I was supposed to get paid on Friday.
Oh no, you're paying us.
Oh, okay.
That was a bill, not a coming check for you.
Yeah, I got that $1 taken out of my bank account and put back in, to get direct deposit.
But and I mean, like critical role is big enough where they do have an income that comes through for them, but most of them aren't like, oh man, this is my livelihood here. So if someone uses a story from them, cool. I'm sure Matt Mercer has no problem with you taking their world that they've built and just kind of doing your own thing in it, especially if you're just doing it with friends.
They actually have a campaign book now.
Do they?
Yeah, and they sell it. It's part of like the whole Wizards thing. But I mean, I don't know, with everything going on, I know they've got their own the rule system. They're really trying to like completely change everything. But I mean, I'm more talking along the lines of like physical things, like Dwarven Forge, like minis and stuff like that. Like, you know, at least give credit to the person, or if you can, go to their Patreon or their Etsy or whatever and be like, here's a $5, thanks for this 3D model.
Right.
Well, I think that is it. Good discussion. Phil, thank you for leading that.
Yeah, it was incredible. It's something that I've kind of thought about like for a while, like just talking about like the different types of them and like just wild, like how we all like have to incorporate all those different things. So it was good to like finally like talk it out with someone, because like if I were trying to do that with my wife, she would just smile and kind of nod at me and she'd be like, can we
it's
watch
like, you do your nerd thing. That's so
can
cute.
we just watch the Family Feud?
Next week I think we're going to be out because Nicholas is out. So who knows what we'll do, but I'm excited for it. We'll get playing shortly here soon again.
Yeah, the week after next.
Which, if you're listening to this 3 years from now, good luck with that timeline.
Just remember, our favorite holiday is coming up soon.
Hey, my birthday.
No, 9/11.
No, I know.
Never forget.
That's actually Jacob's birthday. Mine's 9/6.
Never forget.
Never forget. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
The BS role is Timothy Farr as our forever DM, Valerie Simone as Ida Gotham, Nick Urban as Snee, Phil J. Cox as Enoch Sunforger, Ryan Freeman as Babylon Wonderhoof. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts can be found. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a review. It helps us a lot. We do not advertise, so our ratings and reviews are the best way to help us grow. Thank you so much. Love you a lot. Have a good one.
Tim is currently covered in poop.